talked about last year was this cancer vaccine. And where, the whole idea with Bob's Buddies and the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation is about research. But listen to this story about was it just last year that we talked about that for the first time, I think?
That's correct.
So tell us about the vaccine and when that can be used and what it does.
Sure. So we began a research project over at Duke University a few years back with the support of the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation to develop what we call cancer vaccines, or trying to use the immune system essentially to recognize brain tumor cells as foreign and lead to their rejection. And so that started as a collaboration and a research project a few years ago to try to make this become a treatment that we could make available for children with malignant brain tumors and evaluate the safety and the potential efficacy of trying to treat tumors with
All right, efficacy. Don't be using big words with me.
The effectiveness
yes.
of this approach. And so that support from the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation allowed us to actually compete successfully for a much larger award from the Department of Defense, and they essentially sponsored a clinical trial that opened at the end of last year and has actually enrolled the first children on this new treatment approach, and we've actually have our first child who's begun receiving vaccines about 3 weeks ago and is continuing to be evaluated. We have our second patient who's coming for therapy in the next week. So this has been an approach that we've developed and worked for quite some time, but are now in the process of what's called a clinical trial, where we're looking at the safety and then the effectiveness of this approach.
Efficacy. All right, but look, is it only certain tumors that can be given this vaccine, or is it any tumor?
Well, at present we are looking at two types of tumors, recurrent medulloblastomas, which is one of the more common malignant brain tumors in children, and another type of tumor which is similar but called primitive neuroectodermal tumors, or PNETs for short. And the approach that we're using to treat these tumors, if it's effective, can be developed for other cancers, and we're actually currently exploring using a similar approach for many other tumor types. But we've begun to evaluate it in a very specific setting, and then we'll expand it to other tumor types as well.
So in this person that, this kid that you just, what did you say, last week was the first?
3 weeks.
2 weeks ago was the first treatment, and
okay.
Received their second treatment this past week.
This past week. How quickly should you see if it's going to react in a positive or negative way?
Well, when we began what's called a phase 1 trial, which this is, the first thing we are most importantly trying to evaluate is the safety of the approach. And so we carefully monitor how patients are doing and how the children are reacting to receiving the treatment. Obviously, we are also very hopeful to see positive clinical responses. And so as part of the standard treatment, these children undergo usually MRIs or other evaluation of their tumor status every few months. And so we'll continue right from the beginning to assess how well children are doing, and most importantly also that they are receiving the treatment well and not having any adverse effects. And so that's a big part of the initial stages of the trial, and once we've shown that in a smaller number of children, we can then expand that treatment to a large. And really no one individual or one even laboratory group can possess all of the required information to really make significant advances. And so one of the things that the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation does a great job of is sponsoring seminars or regional meetings where they literally do invite, as you mentioned, researchers and physicians from all over the country and all over the world, really internationally, to spend time together and share that information, develop collaborations. The project we worked on at Duke really came from the funding that allowed us to bring several investigators together and continue to work over a long period of time in order to bring new advances into the clinical arena. So that's an absolute essential part of what the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation does, and critical in trying to make continued advances in combating this disease.
And that depends on donations, so you have to call right now. 866-975-CURE, 866-975-2873, so you can continue to make vaccines to save these children's lives.
Dr. Mitchell, do you ever sit there and you're about to go to sleep and you think, oh, what if we tried the 8934 genome to go up to the 3578 genome, that maybe we could, you ever have those really smart thoughts?
Well, we certainly spend a lot of time thinking about different approaches, or as new knowledge becomes available from other investigators or other things that people are trying in their laboratories, we continue to think about how could that possibly fit into the approaches that we are taking. And so
In the shower, you think about that in the shower? Because I think pizza. I think I'll have pizza. And you're thinking how to save kids from having this horrible tumor.
Yeah, early morning tends to be the time that I can spend a little bit thinking about the approaches we're taking now and how to integrate new information. And yeah, sometimes the best ideas come from having a conversation with somebody about what they're working on, and you begin to see a piece of the puzzle that might fit in with something that you're working on. And so those ideas really do get generated in a lot of different contexts.
I'm going to ask another stupid question, but if there's breast cancer, and we know one thing that will help breast cancer, most of us just hear the word cancer, and we think it's one problem. But when you hear something about breast cancer, why is it, or prostate cancer, and we know that there's a great chance that you'll survive that, why then is it so difficult to add another cancer that you can't use the same medication? Do I say that
Sure,
properly?
sure. No, so if you think about it, the way we classify tumors today is mostly based on how they appear under a microscope to a pathologist and the region in which they grow, what organ they're derived from. What we've learned through research is that when you begin to look at these cancers at the genetic level, even within a single type of cancer, like prostate cancer or breast cancer or pediatric brain tumors, they are different at a genetic level from one another, even though they may appear very similar. And so that genetic difference often means that what's driving the tumors are different, even though they may appear similar, and therefore very likely the types of drugs or therapies that particular tumor will respond to can be very different. So we have to understand a lot more about the similarities and the differences between these different tumor types in order to develop therapies that can be better directed towards a particular cancer or a particular genetic type of prostate or brain cancer, if that makes sense.
And you guys know that there is a cure. It's just a matter of what combination of things need to be put together to make that happen, right?
Well, we certainly know that the ability to cure brain cancers and other cancers is really going to be dependent on stopping the abnormal growth of these tumor cells in a specific manner. So we understand a lot about what causes these cells to divide or grow out of control. We're learning more and more about the types of signals that can cause an arrest or a growth arrest or kill these tumors. So part of it is understanding the complexity from one patient to another in terms of which approach is most likely going to work in a given patient. So that has a lot to do with learning more about how to understand the tumors at an individual level. And then some of it is still discovering safe drugs that can target those signals that are driving cancer. So we've made a lot of advances, but the reason why continuing to support the research is so critical, there's still a lot of things we need to understand before we can know exactly what's the best therapy for a given patient or a given tumor.
Would you say in the past 5 years there have been dramatic findings from research?
Absolutely. So I think in particular, a couple of areas that I'm very excited about that we've seen advances in. One is this concept of personalized medicine, or really analyzing tumors at a genetic level and beginning to predict or at least more intelligently choose therapies that we think will impact a tumor based on how it appears at a genetic level. Mm-hmm. The ability to do that has been around for some time, but over in the last 5 years, we've seen a huge advances in the technology that can allow us to do this in a real fashion. So we can envision being able to essentially sequence or analyze a patient's tumor in enough time to make decisions about how they may be treated. And that's been an advance that only has recently become available. And then the second area is actually in our field of immunotherapy or cancer vaccines. We've seen the first FDA approval of immune-based treatments for cancers in the last really 18 months, and now have seen several therapies that have gone through all the stages of development and shown to be effective. So I think using the immune system to attack tumors in a real and effective way has been a very recent breakthrough, and we'll continue to see large advances in the future.
All right, yeah, let's talk just finally about over the next 5 years, the research money that people will be calling right now to make a donation. What is possible over the next, in your expertise, what's the next thing, the next step to make a 5-year strategy to say, wow, 5 years ago we didn't even know? Is it the same stuff you're studying now that you're talking about?
Well, I think there's a few areas that I particularly believe will change dramatically in the next 5 years. I think that the way we Test therapies will be done in a much more intelligent manner and maybe even adaptable. So you can envision treating patients based on information that you have about the genetics of their tumor, and if that happens to not be effective to elicit a cure, reanalyzing those tumors that have recurred and having a better understanding of what's the next line of therapy that we should treat with. So a much more personalized and adaptable approach to treating cancers, I think, is something we're going to see not just in pediatric brain tumors, but in other cancers as well. And I also believe that we're going to really be able to combine existing drugs and existing therapies in a way that will give much more meaningful cures and treatments than we've been able to in the past based on that information.